Yes, we set up our operation after the first fiasco where the first ship.
Yes.
Then we did. J&J decided that we would go out and do our own thing. So, and I think I touched on the fact that Tom Hanley took hold brokers, got an introduction to a company, and then I came out and set up a joint venture with him.
Yeah.
And Simmons, Chris Simmons, we'll call him Chris Simmons, right. Something close to that. He would have been a guy about 40, jeans, shirt, cowboy hat, and this is West Virginia. And West Virginia is the second poorest state in the Union. And so, there's not a lot of culture in West Virginia. So he had his own little operation in a nice office building on his close to his mine site, and I think the thing that jumps into my mind is me driving up. He didn't hear me. I went to the door into the office, and there his secretary was stretched across his knee.
Oh God. That's like something out of a film.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. This is the sort of thing that goes on. It turned out that he invited us to go down to the local town, Red Bush, and there's a pizza parlor in Red Bush, which is run by his fiancée. Now that wasn't the secretary. That wasn't the secretary. No. That was the fiancée. And just go in there. Frank Rice was with me, and the two of us went in. Found the place, went in, introduced ourselves. Chris Simmons sent us. Oh yes, he phoned. He said you were coming. So we sat down. This was my introduction to pizza.
Okay.
So she presented us with menus, and there were all these different styles of pizzas, all of which were double Dutch to me, different sizes of pizzas. So she came along and she said, you ready to order? No, we're just looking here at the moment. She said, I'll come back. And Frank, he said, what size? I said, well, I suppose we'll ask for a big one. It's been paid for by the guy over there. Right. So anyway, he asked for two. I think they were 10-inch pizzas.
Right.
And these things, she did look at us a bit at the time. One each. Yes. So down they came, and there were these things enormous.
Yes.
Simply enormous. So, having ordered it, I felt that we had to eat it. And eventually I think we got through, but it put me off pizza for life. Not a lot more that I remember about that. The contract was set up. Frank was looking after the men, and he was travelling back and forwards as I was. Tom Hanley wasn't involved anymore. So then we did have to set up an office thing, and that's where Frank Rice came. So Huntington, West Virginia, is the biggest town in West Virginia. So we got an office building in West Virginia. I can't remember who organised that. Was it me? It might have been. And we advertised then for an office manager. someone who knew something about coal mining. So our number one candidate was Frank Proud.
Okay.
So Frank and I got on, and Frank Rice got on very well with Frank Proud. So Frank had worked for Caterpillar. Huntington was big enough to have a Caterpillar dealer there, so he knew the type of equipment and so on that we were using, and that was useful. And we knew about coal and coal tipples and all the things that we needed that we needed to be filled in on. So that was great. Frank and I were good friends. Yes, and then he introduced me to his wife, brought me home for a meal when I was there, so I knew his wife very well. And the two kids, the two boys, they separated. Susan and Chris and Frank separated. Met up with, what do you call her?
Pat.
Met up
Adams.
with Pat. I visited him, and he took me to Pat's house,
Right.
and I was introduced there, and she was a very nice lady, and that has worked very well.
Yeah.
That has stuck together over
Yeah.
the many years since. So that's that part. New York was very interesting. We were working with a law firm and got on, Tom Hanley and myself, we got on very well with two of the three partners there. And they had Irish connections, which Tom Hanley had found out about, so that was why we ended up with them. But they were gentlemen lawyers with big houses, which they took us to dinner 2 or 3 times, took us to a yacht race,
My goodness.
and that was good too. But yes, they were nice people, a lovely American upper middle class way of life.
Very nice.
The sort that you see on the films and
Yes.
so on, and very nice. Can't remember much more about New York.
Well, you were talking about Los Angeles towards the end of the last session,
Oh, yes.
and
there's
you know,
plenty to
with
talk there.
with the two guys, Klaus, yes,
Simonson.
yes,
And
and Malcolm,
yes, I talked about Klaus and his peccadillo.
yes, yeah,
But on the other partner was even more interesting, and that was Malcolm Kingston. I think it said Malcolm was not tall, very rotund, no good looks, with the fluffy hair a bit like Einstein. He looked a bit like Einstein, but a wonderful personality, charisma oozing out of him, and so everybody thought well of Malcolm. And Malcolm liked the ladies too. I should tell you that Malcolm and I got on very well together. I would fly in, I'd been there for maybe 2 weeks, 3 weeks, then he would come home for maybe 10 days, and then he would fly back again, and each time I'd bring a bottle of Black Bush, and most times then Malcolm would say, right, come on back to dinner, and he would cook. And his house, I maybe touched on before, his house was on Rodeo Drive, and it was a sort of pseudo Tudor type house, very English in atmosphere, big garden on Rodeo Drive. So I would have dinner with Malcolm, and we would then settle back in the living room for a bottle of Blackbush. And Malcolm would tell me the whole history of himself, which was not an edifying history. No, he was, when in England, he was the youngest partner in one of the biggest law firms in Liverpool. Big law firm, young partner, brilliant. He specialised in property and property sales and so on. So he represented a number of wealthy clients to the law firm, and they would be interested in property in the States. So Malcolm became their property advisor. And Los Angeles was his area, and he would organize purchases for some of these clients. And then he got a bit ahead of himself, and he saw a particular deal that he liked. He's telling me the story. He liked a bit of this deal. It needed a bit of money. He could get the money and repay it. Get the money from the firm and repay it after the deal was done.
Right.
Except that the deal went sour.
Oh dear.
And he was then persona non grata with the police after him.
Oh.
So
He skipped the country.
left wife and 2 children and skipped the country.
My goodness.
And
Didn't arrange for his wife and kids to come out?
Oh, no. So, I mean, I'm talking about, he's telling me this, and he's been in Los Angeles at that time for maybe 4 years.
Right.
And, no. He didn't say that he was divorced, and I don't think I don't know that I don't even think he was divorced. He just left them. What he did do, however, the rascal, he brought out $250,000. Again, he wouldn't tell me exactly whose $250,000.
Yes.
So he spent something like 6 months on his own in Los Angeles, just sussing out the market.
Right.
Sussing out the market.
My
He
goodness.
came across a deal that he thought was, this one will work. So, being Malcolm, getting information wherever he needed it, he heard of an Iranian multimillionaire coming in from Iran at the time that the Shah's thing was collapsing. This guy, he knew that he was coming into Los Angeles airport, LAX, on a particular day on a particular flight, or he made it his business to find out. So Malcolm went down to the LAX, watched the plane come in, put out an announcement. What do they call it?
Tannoy announcement.
The very thing, Tannoy. A Tannoy announcement that Mr. So-and-so, please meet someone at the information desk. So the two of them met. Malcolm introduced himself, and Malcolm being Malcolm. Malcolm took him to lunch at the best restaurant and laid out this deal for him. And the guy said yes. The deal went through. They both made a lot of money, and Malcolm was set up.
My goodness.
So then he met with Klaus, and they formed British and Continental Development Corporation. And then they were doing stuff whenever Burnett and Hallamshire somehow came over and took them over.
Right.
Burnett and Hallamshire were developing. Burnett and Hallamshire at that time, they'd taken over us, but they were a star on the London Stock Exchange. Their share price was going up and up and up, and they were desperately aggressive. And of course, eventually that was their downfall, but that was 3 or 4 years later.
Yeah.
But anyway, there you are. And so, anyway, we were taken over, J&J was taken over. I had come back to the office. The Connecticut Hampshire directors suggested to me, did I want to go back to what I was doing in coal mining? No, I didn't. I would prefer to stay with construction because the company was ongoing. So that was okay, and then they came shortly afterwards and they said, look, we have need for somebody in a new company that we've got in California, somebody who knows something about construction and construction law. Will you go, will you do it? I said, well, I'll have a look at it. Yes, I'll go and have a look. So that was how I got out there. And that was wonderful. That was wonderful couple of years. I can tell you when it all ended. It ended in 1984.
Right.
And in 1984, Burnett and Hampshire went belly up. And they had to sell off.
And were you
everything.
still in Los Angeles at that point?
Yes, I was in Los Angeles. So I suddenly found myself without a job.
Goodness.
So anyway, came back to the selling off of J&J and the breaking up of J&J and so on. And we got a wee bit of money out of that. And then Sam Nutt and Frank Rice and I decided we'd set up our own little company. And it was in those times, well, in the J&J times, maybe for the last couple of years, J&J was in the Middle East, and there was need for somebody to look at contracts and so on. So I would make trips out there.
Is this when you were based in Banbridge?
Based in
Yeah.
Banbridge.
Okay.
Or sometimes based in Banbridge, and sometimes we were going to Los Angeles or going to Amman or Saudi or something like that. An international kitty at that time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Business class travel, which is very nice. So yes, some of this equipment, this heavy equipment that was coming off Shetland, they took it to the Middle East. Sam Little was the instigator of that. Sam, aggressive, confident, sure of himself, and had a bit of overseas experience with it previously, so it wasn't completely new to him. But he reckoned himself to be the bee's knees. So anyway, he got a couple of smallish jobs in Jordan. So the company had an office then based in Amman in Jordan. So I would fly out to Amman and for looking at contracts and so on. And I should introduce the guy you and I met down in Killylea.
Morris Crawford.
So Morris had actually joined J&J before I did.
Yeah.
And Morris, again, confident, charismatic. He and Tom McGuinness became very friendly. So it was actually, Morris had worked in my office in J&J, in Graham's. He had worked in my office. Originally, I had met him when he worked for the Tyrone County Council on the motorway.
Okay.
And I and he had been dealing a lot, and I pulled the wool over his eyes. He was an absolute novice.
Right.
And I had a great time with him, and he thought I was great.
Yeah.
So, and then of course, as we mentioned, that I was in very good terms with Morris's boss, Sam Craig. Sam Craig with the Alpha and the carpets.
Yes.
So anyway, Morris then left Graham's, joined this new company, J&J, and he and Tom McGuinness got on well. And I understand Tom had said to Morris, look, we need somebody to do this claim on Home Across on Shetland, on Orkney. This claim, we need somebody for it.
That's how that came about.
And Morris said, well, Graham's have a man. So that was how I got it.
Yeah, okay.
It was really through
Morris. Yeah, okay.
So Morris then, fast forward to Jordan, Morris then was running the Jordan office. Morris was running the Jordan office.
And what was the Jordan work at that time?
At that time, a couple of road works with bridges,
Okay.
civil engineering, construction, road works and bridges, and the heavy equipment that goes with that. So one of the people that Morris introduced me to was one of Jordan's principal civil engineering contractors, a guy who ran his own operation successfully, lots of money, and a very Middle East gentlemanly appearance. Beautifully dressed, Western, beautifully dressed, and terribly proper in his approach to things. So he and I got on fine, and he invited us to dinner. He said it was a special occasion. His daughter was just getting engaged, so it was an engagement party, and it would be held in the Intercontinental Hotel in Amman. Amman's the capital of Jordan. So the Intercontinental is an international class hotel. And we had our own big room and waiters and so on running around us. And yes, there was about 8 people around the table. And at each place there was a half bottle of Dimple Hague whiskey. Now, Dimple Hague was a 3-cornered bottle.
Right.
Scotch, of course, and very upmarket Scotch. So 8 bottles of Dimple Hague. You weren't asked what you were going to drink. You were drinking whiskey. So there was music and there was dancing, and then we were introduced to the bride and the groom, the prospective bride, his daughter, and she was gorgeous. Oh, very sophisticated and obviously the product of a lot of money.
Yes.
And her fiance then was an airline pilot for Jordan Airlines.
Okay.
And a very nice, smooth gentleman as well. Nice guy. I remember that he sat at one end of the table and I was sitting more or less beside him. And at one stage he said, "Oh, I'm comfortable here." And he pulled out a big pistol and he sat it down on the table. He said, and this was, I said, "Let me comfortable." So it was a pistol sat there. So anyway, there was lots of music. I can't whether there was their own band there. I wouldn't be surprised if it was, or was it just music? But anyway, we were all dancing, and there was a couple of other women in the place, and I remember dancing with this wonderful, beautiful prospective bride. She was lovely, and she danced like a dream. But I could dance a wee bit of those times too. So that was good. That's a nice memory. That's a nice memory.
Good.
Well, almost similar to that, I'm fast forwarding now. We were into Iraq, and J&J had its own offices there. We were doing building work for the, what do you call the boy that we eventually...
Hussein?
Yes. We were doing work for him.
My goodness.
And we were also doing some road works and the reservoir also. Happy thing about Iraq was that always we had no problem with payment. In a lot of the Middle East countries that you were in, payment was slow and you had to keep running them to get it. Not Iraq, they paid on the dot. That was very, very reassuring.
Yes.
Anyway,
You didn't meet Saddam Hussein, did you?
didn't meet him. No, I didn't. No, no. But I met his Secret Service.
Really?
Yeah. Our office in Baghdad, we had 3 or 4 Iraqis working in it, and we were informed that we would have another guy appointed to our organization, and he was the Secret Service guy. And he, like most Iraqis, not terribly tall, and quite a nice guy, not terribly pushy, but he kept an eye on everything that was going on. And he had his briefcase, and occasionally he'd open the briefcase and there was always a revolver sitting there in the briefcase. But typical JMJ, and I'm sure it was Sam Little that had organised this. You need to, Sam's idea was you do need to keep in with the Secret Service guy. So he was invited over to Banbridge
My goodness.
and given 2 large suitcases which he could fill with stuff to bring home. Clothes and Marks and Spencer's or all the, and he would, and that happened at least twice in my knowledge.
My goodness.
So we were well regarded there.
Yeah.
We were well regarded. So that was fun. Yeah, so there was one, I can't remember what the purpose of it was. Yes, I think we'd successfully completed a job, and it was to say good on us. So we had a posh meal in the, can't remember the name of the hotel in Baghdad, but rest assured it was the best hotel in Baghdad. Again, a room on its own. Our engineers around it, and we had about 6, myself and Frank Rice were there. And I think Morris there, I think he was. Anyway, there must have been 8 of us around the table, and you ordered from the menu, and the food was wonderful. You had your own maitre d' there, and he ordered the waiters around for all the services. Came the end of the meal, and then the maitre d' then came around the table with a box of cigars. And all the guys, of course, took a cigar. I didn't, but the rest of them did. Most of them, the rest of them did. And then the maitre d' came along, dipped the cigar in champagne, the tip of the cigar in champagne, and then applied the light to it. And puff, sir, puff. Yes. So that was, it was a ceremony.
A little ritual,
A
yeah.
ceremony.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
yeah. I remember one other place I remember talking about restaurants was Inaman decided that we would go to a Chinese restaurant, but a posh Chinese restaurant. And the thing about that was the little maitre d' came running in to meet us, and yes sir, your table is waiting. And he walked backwards, bowing backwards until we got to the table. It's hilarious. It's hilarious. So that's life in the Middle
Yes.
East. I'm not sure what it's like now, but that's how it was. Sam Little had set up a contract that he had got internationally advertised for so many kilometers of roadway in Jordan, in Yemen, in Yemen, with so many bridges over it. Quite a big job. And Sam priced it and negotiated it and sent it in, and the Yemeni government, it was Yemeni government contract, they have not Jordanian, they had a consulting engineer, a Middle East consulting engineer. Anyway, quite a well-known consulting engineer, well-regarded. So we got news in Banbridge that we lost bidder. We would be offered the contract, and so Sam then got the two estimating guys to go through the tender that had gone in and check it all out. And as they checked it out, they found they'd made a mistake in the cost of fuel. Anyway, they got it wrong by a multiple of 10. So, could it be done for the money?
Was that Sam's fault? Was it Sam Little?
I don't know.
You don't know.
It could very well be. It would be typical of him. He would make an assumption, you see. Somebody, oh yes, of course. So, could you do the job? Then they then said, no, we don't think we can. So Tom McGuinness then, he said, Roy, would you go out to sort that out? We want to withdraw or else we want to retender. So I went out and met with Morris Crawford. He was the boy there. And we went along. It was quite funny. I flew into Amman, and then we flew from Amman into Sana'a in Yemen, which is Amman, Saudi Arabia, Yemen at the very end of the Arabian Peninsula. Into Sana'a. Wonderful old city. Morris had booked a hotel room for each of us. We went to a taxi, and a wee man came running up and said, excuse me, you are JMJ Contractors? Yes, we are. I have booked a hotel for you. Come with me, please.
Right.
So we came with him, please.
Yes.
So, yes, he directed the taxi, or else it was his own car. And we went up 2 or 3 side streets to get to the back door of the hotel.
Right.
And he brought us in by the back door, and we checked in and we got our rooms. And he said he would call for us in the morning. And we asked him, we hadn't made any arrangements. How did you know we were on that plane? He said, oh, we have our ways. So, next morning, he said, the engineer wants to meet you. Now, the engineer always on the contract is the boss man for the project. And he would be the representative of the client.
Yeah.
So the client is the Yemeni government. So this guy was the engineer for the Yemeni government. So the boy got us into the car again to the back door, and took us through various little alleyways and little side streets in this old city to this big walled house, and knocked on the door. Somebody let us in to a yard, big wall around it, and then took us up to the front door. No, the back. What I think is the back door, because we never really found out. And so we were greeted there, and it was a woman who let us in. Yes, Mr. So-and-so will see you. he'll be in his own study. So she took us there, no, the door was locked. She said, oh, I'll get him. So she came and got him. He came and opened the door. His wife wasn't allowed to do that.
Oh, right.
His wife wasn't allowed to do that. So this study was not really, yes, there was a big desk in one corner, but the walls of it were all surrounded by cushions sitting on the floor. And that was the Emily way. We didn't use chairs, she used cushions. So he was a nice, presentable man, middle-aged. Yes, we're very happy to have Irish contractors, though we have to say my consulting engineers tell me your company is quite small. And we said, well, we're certainly, we've been doing some big jobs recently in North Sea Oil, so I don't think we would describe ourselves as small. He said, that's good, that is good, that's no issue. And then he said, well, I understand you've something to say to me. Yes, sir, yes, we have to tell you that we have found a serious mistake in our tender. And that being the case, we will have to either withdraw or negotiate a new and different basis. And he said, oh, I don't think you'll want to do withdrawal. Good. Well, what is the nature of the problem? Describe it. Price of oil. We're 10 times out in the cost. A small matter. You see, I am the engineer. I sign the invoices. I will make it right.
It happens.
Well, can we have that in writing, please?
Yes.
Oh, no. It'll be a gentleman's agreement.
Right.
Well, you would understand that while we're both gentlemen, we have our responsibilities, yours to your government and us to our board of directors. So we'll call the board of directors and see if they agree. We I'm sure can do a deal. So he said, well, you will have to meet with the consulting engineers. They have made comment that your contract, that you're as a contractor on an international scale, you're small. So they wish to meet with you. Oh yes, that's fine. So we meet with them the next day. And we did. We met with them the next day. They were, yes, very professional engineers. They said, yes, J&J is not well-known name to us. And we note that you've done some North Sea oil work, and that is good, but on an international scale, while we welcome you as a contractor, we're not sure about your financial standing. And we wish to maybe correct that. Now, in putting in a tender, particularly overseas, you put in a bid bond. A bid bond which says that you're putting in a legitimate tender that will stand over. And if you don't, you lose your bid bond. We wish you to double that. So the bid bond will now be twice that. And I said, oh, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. Your engineer has told you that we have a problem with the oil price. And he has assured us that he can make it right for us. But you are telling us that we've got to double our bid bond. That's a variation to the contract.
Right.
The contract, our bid is no longer valid.
Right.
You have removed us from it.
Okay.
Oh, we don't think so. We don't think so. We hadn't thought of that. But we can reduce maybe 1.5 times your bid bond. No. We would like out, and you've given us a way out, so thank you very much.
Right.
Go away and think about it. Talk again to the engineer, and we'll meet again on Thursday. So, of course, we contacted Tom McGuinness and Tom and who else was there? I think yes, Jim McIver was there. And Tom's view was, look, these people are a bit suspect.
Yeah.
The engineer should be okay. He's an international one, but if he doesn't recognise what you have said, and he said, well, I don't think we want to do any more business with him. He said, give me a call back after you've seen the engineer again. But at the moment, we'd be inclined to say no. So we met the engineer again, and he said, I have talked with the consulting engineer. I know that there is a problem there in the bid bond, but I am the engineer. I can make that right for you too. I don't think our board of directors agree with you. You'll not be reporting our conversations to your government, will you? Well, I can't do that. Well, we have done it with our board of directors, and we're getting very negative vibes from it. And he said, but what about my $250,000? Sorry. Your company is paying me $250,000 in a London bank upon the signature of this contract.
Good heavens.
And I said, if that's the case, I definitely need to speak to my board of directors again.
Good heavens.
So it was Sam Little. Big.
Oh, so Sam had actually done that?
Yes, of course he had. Of course he had.
Good heavens.
So, talk to the boys again. This is all Morris and me. Talk to them on the phone. Tell them again and said, no, look, get out. Just leave. But what about the bid bond? We'll argue about that later. Just get out. So Morris and I agreed. Oh, by the way, I should have mentioned that when in between these meetings with the engineer and the consulting engineer, we had felt uneasy enough that we had gone to the British consulate.
Right, okay.
And we had reported to the British consul that we were feeling a bit uneasy and explained what the problems were. And I remember he said this, this is the most peculiar country I have ever been consulate for.
My goodness.
He said, and he opened his briefcase and there he had his automatic pistol. He said, it's the only country in the world that I've had to carry a firearm.
My goodness.
So he said, if your people are saying to get out, he said, I would agree with them.
Right.
So we rushed back to the hotel, threw the stuff into the case, wondered whether we were being followed, and got the first taxi and the airport, please. And they drove us to the airport. We rushed up to the desk and said, we're looking for a ticket what's the first plane out? And we said, first plane in any direction. And it said, well, as it happens for us, it said the first plane is to Abu Dhabi.
Right.
And we had an office in Abu Dhabi.
Right.
So if the plane was going out very shortly, we jumped on a plane, flew to Abu Dhabi. It was not a dry plane, and we
Yeah.
steadied our nerves, and staggered off the plane, and the boys at the office were waiting for us.
Yeah. Wow. That was hairy.
And it was Boris and I had got a taxi to take us down on the route of the work.
Mm-hmm.
A new road on down to Aden, quite a distance. And that was funny too, because Middle East, midday, siesta. Except it wasn't called siesta, but it was a siesta. That's what the cushions around the walls were for.
Oh, okay.
You sat back there
Had a snooze.
and you had a chew. You chewed quat,
Oh.
which is a narcotic.
Right. Good heavens.
A bit like parsley. They had bunches of it, green, and we chewed them up. I didn't chew them out anymore.
No.
But anyway, we had Morris was quite familiar with that, of course, in Jordan, whereas I hadn't come across before. But the taxi driver, we'd set off, I'm not sure, about probably 10 o'clock in the morning, and a long drive, about 3-hour drive, maybe longer. Straight road through the desert. At the desert, you would see guys on horses, always with a rifle over their shoulders, and sometimes on camels, rifle over their shoulders. Our taxi driver, he sat with a big curved dagger stuck in his belt. So, got on the road, onto the straight road, and he sat back in his seat, and he put a brick on the accelerator pedal, and he sat with his feet up, and he got his quad out. And we were sitting in the back seat.
Oh my God.
And he just kept a hand on the steering wheel. And dozed us way down.
That's amazing.
Amazing.
Were you not terrified?
Oh yes, for a while, until we saw, in fact, the road was that straight, he didn't have to worry.
Right.
Apart from hitting the old camel, but no.